Mark here, the Mark 2.0 podcast, bringing inspiring guests on to talk about what is going on, talk about their lives. Now, Gordon, I wanted to start with you as someone who, served in the military in Canada. What was that like? Because I would like to hear your experience.
Well, there are all kinds of different branches in the military. In June of 2021, I retired, and I was in what is referred to as the communications branch or signals. My actual title was ACES, Army Communication Information Systems Specialist. So I rose to the lofty rank of corporal, which I was, some refer to it as CFL, and that's not Canadian Football League, it's Corporal for Life. And I worked in bases in Montreal and Kingston, in Valcartier, Quebec, and I ended my career working at Canada's largest Air Force base in the communications center. And the interesting thing about military life is you get a sense of the importance of framing a narrative, the importance of in terms of communication, and you get a sense of the importance of contextualizing things in a manner that will ensure buy-in from the troops. That's a military, the orders will come down on high from a general down to a major, from a major they'll go to a chief warrant officer, from a chief warrant officer down to the sergeants. And as the message is disseminated down, there's very much an effort put forward to contextualize things and frame the narrative to get buy-in from the troops, to get them to basically follow orders to the letter. No, I don't like to say blind obedience, because in the Canadian military, one of the things that is one of the points of pride is that individual members are only to follow lawful orders. You are required to follow a lawful order, and an unlawful order, one is allowed to refuse to comply. However, that's a dicey area. You better be sure your feet are on rock solid ground if you're going to refuse to obey an order. If you believe it's unlawful, you better be rock solid sure that because military justice is harsh, whereas in the civilian world, one is considered innocent until proven guilty. Flip that around with military justice. If you're brought up on summary charges, the assumption is the onus is on the accused to prove their innocence, as opposed to having your guilt proven. So it puts a much greater burden on the individual. So hardly anything highfalutin, just a soldier.
Now, what inspired you to get into the military?
Well, I joined late in life. I joined at the advanced age of 43 and served just under 12 years. And the impetus for it was it had a number of life challenges. The best way to describe it is midlife crisis. At 42, 43 years of age, I basically made the decision to go in at 41, 42, took some time to get in. 43, I joined. I was going through midlife crisis. At that point in your life, you realize your life is half over, and you want to do something significant with the remainder, and want to learn some new things, want to approach things from a different perspective. So went into basic training as a buck private, no hook. They call you a private recruit. and you get your hook and you're a private. And then once you get fully trained within your trade, mine being this ACES, once you're fully trained, then you get your corporal, you get your second hook, and then you can go up from there. I opted out of promotion when I started when they have what they call the merit board, and your name starts coming up and your ranking for promotion. And I was going to be sent on my primary leadership qualification, which would have meant, oh, I think it's about 2-3 months away, probably somewhere Wainwright or Sheffield or somewhere in the East Coast. And my personal situation, health issues with my wife, I couldn't be away for that long a period of time. And so easiest thing to do was simply I'll tap out, I'll stay a corporal and leave it at that.
Oh, it's very fascinating. Now, Ian, with you, were you born in people know you as Ian from Montreal, you know, the listeners. Are you from Montreal? And what do you like best about Montreal and opposed to where you lived before? Because you've lived outside of Montreal before too, also.
Yeah, I was born in Burlington, Ontario, and I was adopted. And my parents at that point, they moved, we didn't live in Burlington. We moved to a town called Drummondville in eastern townships of Quebec, and then lived there for 4 years, and then moved to the suburbs of Montreal. And I grew up there. And so I wasn't in the city. I was in the suburbs. I grew up in the suburbs. And it had quite a wonderful upbringing that way. You know, life was good. And you know, Montreal was. I was discovering Montreal more and more as obviously when I got older, and then eventually moved downtown. I traveled a bit in my life, so I've lived abroad for over 2.5 years. So in Asia, and you know, Montreal's always, you know, I could have chose to move to other cities, but Montreal still proves to be a city that has quite a nice balance of, you know, characteristics that still appeal to me. And one of the aspects that I like about a city is its history and culture, and its compact nature. Like it's a city that you can walk around. It's got a lot of history and culture, obviously, and you know, it's where my family lives. So that's one of the main factors, of course, that I decided to stick around. And you know, it's my home base. You know, I've become a real Montrealer. I mean, are participating in a lot of Montreal, you know, festivals and activities, and knowing the you know, the small, like, let's say events and things that maybe a tourist wouldn't even hear about. You know, like we have, I'll just mention one, like we have this tradition on the east side of Mount Royal, and it's in a park just at the base of Mount Royal Park, and it's called the Tam Tams. And every Sunday they have a gathering of Tam Tam players, and it's during the, you know, the spring, summer, and fall, and it's very bohemian. You know, it's fantastic. You got like just like hundreds of people there. They just go sit and picnic on the side of the mountain, on the hills, and participate in the Tam Tams, and do all sorts of other stuff, juggling or walking the tightrope, practicing. It's a real interesting. So anybody who comes to Montreal, I usually, for that unique experience alone, I give them a little experience of that local tradition.
Now, do they have different neighborhoods? Because like when I lived in Chicago for a couple of years, and that's what I liked, is the festivals in different neighborhoods in Bridgeport, and you know, they had different events, movies in the park, Taste of Chicago, and that's one thing that, you know, you don't get out here in the desert. Is it like that in Montreal? Similar?
Yeah, Montreal has quite a quite a lot of different neighborhoods. So, and I can start by saying that there's this one dividing line in the city that kind of is like the dividing line between where it's was traditionally predominantly Anglophone, and then on the other east side was predominantly Francophone. So there's that large division, but it's now a lot more mixed. You have like in a lot of like any other major city, you've got a Chinatown. We got it's a pretty decent Chinatown, but smaller compared to some other places, but it's a Chinatown there. We got a little Italy, we have we have a Portuguese part of the town. We have a Greek part of the town. And so you've got these little pockets that, give quite a bit of diversity. And then you mix it up, of course, because you've got, Montreal is really is a bilingual city. And it's very interesting because recently in my work, I work as in my work, I was an expert witness in a court case. And the judge, when he came in, there's a Canadian flag and a Quebec flag that's in the courtroom. And the first thing he says, because he knows I was an Anglophone, but I speak French fluently, he said, "You're welcome to speak the language of your choice, English or French. That's the beauty." And he said, "That's the beauty of living in Montreal." So coming from a judge, I found that was it was nice to hear. And it makes a very interesting dynamic when you work in two languages. I find it's very stimulating. There was a period of time where a lot of Anglophones did leave the province of Quebec when there was there was turmoil, and there was a separatist movement that was very active. And but now for the people that have stuck it out, myself, I find it's very rewarding. I've been able to work in two language, and I continue to try to master, my second language. And you get in situations where you're literally you're going back and forth in English and French in a meeting, and it's a nice experience from that side. And also culturally, you've got two really different culture sets that are associated with those languages as well. So that's one of the main factors. I also enjoy working in and living in Montreal for that reason as well. And the French culture, I've become very more attuned to it over time, and grown to appreciate a lot of the Quebec artists and so forth, and just the Quebecois culture is very nice. So
Yeah, I haven't had the opportunity to go there yet, but in February 2020, I was in Toronto. Okay, I spent a week staying at the Ice Condos, which is one of those condos across from Scotiabank Arena, 14 York, and it was just unreal, like $500 because it's the dead of cold, $500 for a week. But I noticed from when I was in Toronto growing up, that I'm like, where are all the Canadians at? Does that make sense? Like, it's a very, I'm like, there's not that many Canadians that live in the city of Toronto anymore. Would that be, true or no?
I would say, and Gordon probably obviously got an experience on that, but there's certainly probably a lot of people that go to Toronto from other countries. And, it's a large, probably the largest immigration center, in Canada. It attracts a lot of people. And so you get quite a bit, and obviously the students as well.
Oh,
so
yeah.
Have a lot of international students. And you're going to encounter a lot. Like, whenever I'm in Toronto, I'll always bump into people that are even recent immigrants to Canada. I've had an opportunity to do that recently because I've been in Toronto for the past little while, and I've met people from a lot of different places. So it's possible that you're gonna meet expats as well, people just working, so they haven't even got their Canadian citizen, they may be permanent residents and so forth. But it's quite international, a very international city for that reason.
And was it always like that?
I would use the word cosmopolitan.
Okay.
Yes.
And one thing you have to understand, up until 1976, 1977, Montreal was Canada's leading city. It was the commercial center. It was our New York. And that was up until 1976, 77. And that was and then something important happened in Canadian history. The province of Quebec, for the first time, elected a separatist government, the Parti Québécois, under the leadership of René Lévesque. And that completely shifted the landscape of Canada, because all the banks, Royal Bank, Bank of Montreal, CBC, all the banks had their headquarters. They were all headquartered in Montreal up until then. And when the Parti Québécois, a separatist government who, as part of their platform, a party as part of their platform, wanted to remove Quebec from Canada, well, all of a sudden the banks and all the major corporations with their Canadian headquarters went down the 401 and installed themselves in Toronto. And Toronto, up until then, had always been Canada's second largest city, and it was considered very provincial, and it was very waspy. But with that being said, Toronto, as with Montreal, there's the Chinatown, there's Greek, there's Italian, there are all these different communities. And typically what will happen now in today's world, the majority, I don't know if it's the majority, but most immigrants emigrating into Canada, taking up residence here, people want to, and it's always been this way, whether it was Italian or whether it was Greek or whether it was Chinese, when people emigrate into a country with a different culture and sometimes a different language, they want to be around like-minded, they want to be around people that they're comfortable with, that speak the same language, have the same cultural background. Greeks, Pape and Danforth, that was their little area. St. Clair, that Little Italy, and they all lived in that area. And the first generation, if you have someone coming into a country like Canada, they don't speak English perhaps as a first language, the first generation coming over, the parents, they learn to speak survival skills English. They learn English well enough to conduct their affairs, but they're never fluently bilingual. Their children are typically, quite often, fluently bilingual. They speak both the heritage language, Greek, Italian, Somali, whatever it is, they speak the heritage language and English perfectly. When you get to the grandchildren of the original family that came in, the original parents, when you get to the grandchildren, they understand the heritage language, but they don't speak it. And then you get to the great grandchildren. So after 4 generations, then the heritage language is gone. And now they pretty much fully assimilated into the broader culture. But it takes 4 generations for that to happen. And because Toronto in today's world is the commercial center, it's Canada's largest city, and it's extremely large. There's 2.5 million people-ish in Toronto. And then if you include the GTA, the Greater Toronto Area, which I define as Oshawa to the east, Oakville to the west, and Vaughan, maybe Aurora to the north. Now you're looking at probably close to 7-8 million people. And I have heard Toronto described as being similar in size to Houston in terms of the metropolitan area. And Houston is somewhere around the 7th, 8th, 9th biggest market in America. So that's kind of where Toronto falls in right now. So Montreal had to, when the Parti Québécois came in, they had to take a step down. The banks all moved into Toronto. Then we had a referendum, 1980 or 1981. And even though they lost the referendum, the separatists lost, and Quebec stayed in Canada. Ahead of that referendum, there was a massive exodus out of Montreal because there was the distinct possibility they were voting on whether or not to remove themselves from Canadian Confederation. And people were, there were Montrealers, and especially, but also in the Eastern Townships, which had a strong English influence or a strong English presence. A lot of people, they had a bill in Quebec called Bill 101, and it was a language law. And the Bill 101 required that if you had a sign, if I had a business and it said Gordon's, and that was it, Gordon's, like a pub. The apostrophe S is English. It doesn't exist in French. In French, it would have to be Chez Gordon, but in English, just Gordon's. Well, that would be an illegal sign.
I heard about that. Yeah.
I would be able to put that up on my sign in Quebec, provided I put Chez Gordon higher, and the lettering would basically have to be
Double
twice
the
the
size.
size.
Double the size of the
The
English.
French lettering twice the size of the English lettering. And so when all this was happening, they called it Bill 101, and English Quebecers referred to it as Bill 401, because that's the highway. Once you leave Quebec, you jump on Highway 401.
Yeah.
Now you're in Ontario. You go from 20 to the 401. Canada's a fascinating country with a fascinating history that a lot of people don't really know.
Now, let me ask you something. Does it have, because you see a lot of like, tourist spots like lakes and stuff. I used to watch, the Weekend Guy, and he was out of Muskogee, but growing up in Michigan, it's very similar. Like we would always go up to the cottage, we'd rent out a cottage of my dad's friend. He was a fly fisherman. So we'd go to this place in Honor called Platte Lake, and nothing's there. There's no McDonald's, no civilization. They might have a supermarket or something, but do they have what are their best tourist spots there? Similar to that.
Well, different cities, different provinces have different, like I'll tell you Ontario, and then Ian can tell you what it's like in Quebec.
Yeah.
Because they're different. And we have obviously the big ones. You have Niagara Falls, the honeymoon capital of the world. You have Toronto with its CN Tower. Though, those are two of the biggest. Canada's Wonderland is certainly a big place people like to go to in Toronto. There used to be the Ontario Science Center. Toronto has so many things. There's a castle there that was built during the Depression called
Castle Loma. Yeah, I've been there.
There's tons of things to do in the city of Toronto.
Yeah.
But then when you get out of Toronto, you mentioned the Muskokas, and you have a lot of small towns up in that area, and you have a lot of small little cottagey that would be like northern Michigan towns. I think of Kid Rock song, singing Sweet Home Alabama all week long. He says, catching walleye off the dock.
Yeah.
And we have the Muskoka region, we have the Kawarthas, we have Halliburton. And that actually kind of goes, the Muskokas is where Goldie Hawn and Kirk Douglas and all the NHL hockey players are. That's rich. The next step down from that is the Halliburtons, where if you're rich but not uber rich, you go to the Halliburtons. And then if you're on the lower end, you go to the Kawarthas, and the Kawarthas, it's a lot of campgrounds, trailer park campgrounds that people go to on lakes. And there are towns like Bob Cajun, made famous by the Tragically Hip song. And there are these little tiny towns all over northern Ontario, what we call cottage country, with just a general little store, no Tim Hortons, no McDonald's, just a little tiny dot of a downtown. So, then you have Sudbury. Sudbury has the Big Nickel, where they do mining, and it's got beautiful lakes and wildlife. So Ontario is so huge. I mean, it takes you a day and a half just to drive across it. So go ahead. What are the big touristy places in Quebec?
Yeah, Quebec is it's got the main tourist site I say is that people are probably know outside Montreal is you have Quebec City. Quebec City is like one of the oldest cities in North America. it might in fact be the oldest city. So it's got its a historical town, and it's very beautiful. It's I never, even myself, I never get bored when I go there. And they just in that area alone, they have a lot of stuff. So they have their own like equivalent of the Niagara Falls, which is quite impressive. It's called the Les Chutes de Montmorency, so the Montmorency Falls. So it doesn't obviously have near the volume of a Niagara Falls, but it's it's higher. It's probably 1.5 times the height of Niagara Falls. So it's quite high. And then you just have like Quebec. One of the charming aspects of Quebec is it's just the towns are very charming. So besides the two major cities like Montreal and Quebec, you have some other smaller cities like Sherbrooke. Very lovely city to go and visit, walk around. It's a university town. You know, they got lots of microbreweries, and makes for a very pleasant visit. Obviously, given the vast area of Quebec, it's just the natural surroundings of Quebec, like camping, hiking. In Montreal, one of the beauties, one of the beautiful characteristics is that literally in 20 minutes from my place, I'll be in the countryside. I can be at a ski hill in 20 minutes. And then, the Laurentians is about 45 minutes north. It's a main cottage country that has a vast array of outdoor activities and beautiful scenery to explore that you'll just, you could spend years exploring literally. You've got, and so you have the Gaspé. So the Gaspé is a whole peninsula that a lot of people, they haven't even heard about. And I didn't explore it until just last summer. And it's such a beautiful area. It goes right up the north. It's up the south shore of the St. Lawrence River. And it follows this large, like, I don't know how to describe it. It's kind of around, it goes around and then comes back inland towards the loop. And it's just a spectacular scenery that you wouldn't even expect on the east side of North America, actually. And you got all these little small towns, a lot of character, a lot of charm, and it makes for a great road trip, for people that have the time, because we're talking about 2,000 kilometers if you want to do the loop around, from, let's say, from Montreal back and all the way back around. It's 2,000 kilometers. Yeah.
I've done that tour. I've gone around the Gaspésie twice.
Yeah.
And one of the things that's out there is called Per Se Rock.
Aha. Yes.
Which is one large rectangular shaped rock, then a smaller rock beside it. It's more square in shape with a hole in it that you can walk through. And at low tide, you can walk right out to Per Se Rock. But you better get back before high tide comes in, because you're in the Gulf of St. Lawrence, but it's the Atlantic, it's the Atlantic Ocean. But have you been ever, one place I haven't been to in Quebec and I've always wanted to go, Tadoussac.
Oh, Tadoussac, I've been up to so that's on the North Shore. And
yes.
I've been as far as Tadoussac. So on the north side, there's this whole beautiful area, another beautiful area. After Quebec City going north, you have the Charlevoix region, which is not only recognized for its scenery, but also for some important artists in the history of Quebec. There's some of the famous poets and artists have spent a lot of time there. And then you go further north, you got places like Tadoussac, and they have whale watching and so forth. And just driving down the coast of Quebec, driving up, it's just incredible scenery, breathtaking scenery. And it just goes so far up. It goes all the way up to Sept Île and beyond, which is it's so far. Like, some people can't even fathom the distances that we're talking about here. It's like you'd be on the road for over like almost a day to get up to places like Sept Île easily.
Yeah, he mentioned the whale watching. That's up the Saguenay River.
Yep.
And I've never been. And one day, but I understand belugas are probably the most common whales
Mhm.
that travel up. But I'm told they're also finback and they're also humpbacks.
Yes.
So the large whales even travel up this. And actually, it was just within the last year or so. Near Montreal, there was a humpback whale
Yes.
that they thought had gotten lost.
Yes.
Maybe
It was a
or
young one, I
something.
think. I think it was a
Yes.
young
And-
one.
An adolescent, they said. It
Yeah,
wasn't
adolescent,
fully
yeah.
grown. And sadly, it died.
Yes. Yeah. It was
But
quite,
there were talk, they were showing pictures, because if it had kept going, eventually would make it to Lake Ontario. I
yes.
don't know.
So, and also it was in the freshwater part. So there's an interesting thing. When we went up to the Gaspé, we actually crossed the area where there's a transition from freshwater to saltwater.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's like near Ile d'Orléans, just north of that. It's very fascinating because it's really like a section of the river where the color of the water changes, and it really, you can see the difference, because when we drove up, of course, we were hugging the coast the whole time just to check out the scenery, and you could actually see that. You could see that the way that it kind of like, it is a muddy section of it, and then it clears up and it's salt water. So probably that whale that strayed too far, it got into the fresh water, and that might have had some ill effects on it, since they're not freshwater. They're not usually in fresh water.
Well, they're mammals, so
They're mammals. So I don't know what the effect would be if they're living
Yeah.
if they stray into fresh water. Maybe there's no effect, but yeah, probably not.
My marine biology degree is still pending. I'm working on it. I'm getting it from Facebook.
Yeah.
Gordon, what about
They
the
almost sound like
yeah. What about what is the Pelew Islands? Migrating butterflies on the other side of Detroit and Ontario. Have you ever heard of that? I think it's the Pelew Islands. Is that where it is? You know, there's a spot right on the other side of Detroit. Well, it's a place where the migrating butterflies. I went in, I'm trying to think. You know what I'm talking about. Anyways, I guess you don't know what I'm talking about. You'll have to look it up. But I went in seventh grade because we did a project in science class on we decided we're going to go over there, migrating butterflies. Yeah. And because my dad was dating somebody on the other side of Detroit. So they're like, Dad, why don't you do that? We did it. We came back. We put our heart and soul into the project, and he gave us a C. And we're like, we went out of the country to do our science project, and you give us a C. Yeah. But it's a very fascinating place. It's where they go before they migrate.
Well, I live in a town called Brighton.
Yeah.
And which encompasses a provincial park called, strangely enough, English, French. The name of the park is Presqu'île. Parce que c'est presque une île. It's almost an island. In French, to say almost an island, you say presque une île.
Yeah.
And so the name of the park is Presqu'île Park. And it's basically just a little causeway, a natural causeway that leads you in. So it is almost an island. And it's also a famous migratory spot for birds. And they have boardwalks through the marshes, and it's during the migratory seasons that there are a lot of advertisements up. Or now you've got me stuck in French.
Yeah. Oh, Point Pelee. That's what it's called. Point Pelee National Park. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes. Now I know exactly where you're talking about. But I'm going Point Poilu. I still don't know a lot about it, but I have heard of Point Pelee.
No, it was very fascinating. Yeah.
Yeah. The wildlife in all of Canada, and that's what a lot of Americans like coming up here for, is the wildlife. Quebec is incredible. Quebec and Ontario have very similar geography, although I find in Quebec, because they have the Laurentian Mountains, there are a lot more majestic rivers flowing down. Ian mentioned Montmorency Falls, and then there's the Saguenay River, and there are a lot more, I find, majestic,
very powerful rivers that you just like when you go up to on either side, like encountered some pretty big rivers going up the Gaspé as well. So and it's like, yeah, you're just not used to it because it's like, it's a very powerful body of water that just moves through some of these places.
Well, that's part of our national anthem. Canada being a bilingual country, we have our French national anthem and our English national anthem. And actually the words of the two national anthems, the tune's the same, but the words are nothing like. And one of the things that is said in French is des fleuves inglorieux, glorious rivers.
Mm.
Have I translated that right, Ian? I think your French is better than mine. Oh,
Yeah, fleuve. Yeah, fleuve.
Yeah.
That's sounds like the correct translation. Yeah, it's, and like you said,
Okay.
it's very different for the English and the French ones.
And in the English language, all we sing is, true north, strong and free, God keep our land glorious and free. But in Quebec, it's much more lyrical. It's, when your arm knows how to hold the sword, it also knows how to hold the cross. It speaks to
the Christian background of the founding peoples. Yeah.
yeah.
Absolutely.
Now, Ian, you had mentioned that you lived in Asia.
Yes.
What was that like? Because I've been to Vietnam twice, and it was it's very strange because it was very westernized. Like they had a lot of the American things, but as far as everyone's riding a motorbike, you try to cross the street, it's like that video game Frogger. You have to do this and that. What was it like for you?
Well, let me tell you, it was probably one of the most potent experiences. So I was just graduated from university. So I'm, I'm relatively young, just turned 24. So on my 24th birthday, January 8th, in the middle of the winter, I had never taken a plane before. I had planned this trip already for about 6 months to go to Hong Kong and then to travel in China. I had a friend that was studying, foreign language institute. And then my interest in Asian culture had kind of blossomed while I was in university. I made some, some of the graduate students that I that were there were Chinese, and I just developed an interest in Tai Chi and stuff like that. So anyways, I traveled to Hong Kong, and it was very interesting because like I said, never on a plane before. You're in this plane for like such a long time, and then you go from a very cold environment and suddenly you land and the door opens and you're just hit by all the heat, the humidity, the smells, the noises, and you're in so I grew up in a quiet suburb, and I think part of my draw was I wanted to go to the polar opposite of that. I wanted to experience life to the fullest. If I look back to what my motives were, and I was simply on fire by the experience. The moment I took the first step out of that plane and was landed in Hong Kong and 11 o'clock at night, and had to take a taxi across Hong Kong Island and in pitch black, and just going through these weedy roads, and that just started an entire adventure for me. I mean, I literally could go on and on, but from Hong Kong, I went into China again. That was a very interesting. Huh?
Let me interrupt. So when you went to Hong Kong, you were 24. This was before Hong Kong was swallowed back up into China.
Yes. So let me give the year. That's right. It was in 1991 that I traveled to Hong Kong. So that's when it was still under British control. There was that whole dynamic. And so I was there before the transition. And there was obviously a lot of expats there. And it was just an incredible mix of Asian and Western culture, just beautiful mix of it. So after a couple of days, I got my visa and I went into mainland China, and that was Hong Kong at that time was obviously a very well structured, organized, relatively clean, modern city. And then the beauty is, just as soon as you get across the border at that time into China, it's Shenzhen, which wasn't developed yet. That was before the special economic zone had really taken off. It's like going into a completely different world, into kind of a chaotic, world where it's like my memory is it was in the evening when I arrived in China, and then we took a train from Shenzhen to Guangzhou, And I was just in a complete euphoria as this change, this transition, this dusty environment, just this chaos that you felt that was all around you, a kind of a controlled chaos. And then I took the train to Guangzhou, and then I started my travels. I traveled for 4 months in China. So
Wow.
it was, and I met up with my buddy. So we spent, he was in Beijing, and then we traveled around together, and then he went off, and then I continued traveling for a bit, and we met up again. And it was an extraordinary adventure. And then I ended up, going to some remote areas in China as well. Had some real adventures that I would probably tell over a beer or something like that. But I ended up in Shanghai at the end of that leg of my adventure. And then I took a cruise from Shanghai back to Hong Kong. When I was back in Hong Kong, I didn't have like enough money. I had a plane ticket that I could go back to Canada, or I could continue the adventure. So I decided to continue the adventure. Part of the motivation was I practiced Tai Chi, and my grandmaster was based in Hong Kong. So I ended up that was my main motivation to stick around in Hong Kong, besides just the incredible adventure. I lived in hostels, and I lived in central Hong Kong, Kowloon. I would go to Kowloon Park, and it's where we would train. And I, met all these people, backpacker travelers from around the world that, I'm still like close friends with. I would go and visit them still, from those days. So you make a special bond with people that are going way outside of their comfort zone and experiencing the same type of adventure. You create a very friendships that endure for a lifetime, for sure. It's not the type of people that you're gonna lose contact, that's for sure. And so then at that point I also traveled to, I did a trip to the Philippines at one point, and did an extensive trip around there. And
Yeah.
so it was 2.5 years, and it was probably forming who I am today, for sure.
Yeah.
So you went to Hong Kong, mainland China, Philippines, any
Yeah.
other countries?
At that point, I didn't go to any other countries. Because I was working in Hong Kong. So I spent most of the time was working, and I was a young engineer. So I actually worked on some very fascinating. So at that time, there was these infrastructure projects that were going on because they were building a new airport. When I was there, the airport was still in what they call in like a central part of Hong Kong. And literally you could see the plane almost like flying through the buildings, seemed like, to land. So they were building a new airport, and there was the bridges and so forth that were part of that project. And I actually worked on one of the projects that I'm proud to say was the Chiang Mai Bridge, which is at that time was the second largest suspension bridge in the world. And I was working with a specialty contractor at the time, from Switzerland, and the main contractor was from France. And that was a tremendous experience. And then I ended up working on a construction site in the New Territories, and kind of like a water treatment lagoons for the neighboring landfill. So they would need to, the water would leach out through that garbage landfill, and they would collect it in these lagoons to do a pre-treatment that would be sent further down to another final treatment plant. So I was involved with that. I was working with a Japanese contractor, and it was, again, an incredible work and cultural and all around experience. But I started working when I was in Hong Kong. I was doing all sorts of odd jobs. So I want to mention one of the jobs that an Australian friend of mine, a restaurant right in the heart, hot dogs on the street using an authentic New York style hot dog stand. Okay. And it was spanking brand new. It's they just shipped it over, and I was literally selling hot dogs as one of my first jobs, and I would get a commission for every hot dog I sold. It was pure capitalism. And I was making more money than the managers. Then they tried to cut my commission. And that's when I said, I'm out of here. So all tremendous experiences. I could really go on, but it was wonderful experience.
And they were very friendly to you, so to speak. Because when I was in Vietnam, I was surprised at how friendly they were to, not only Americans, but anyone. I'd be out walking on the street and they'd be like, I don't know how they knew that obviously I stood out, right? But they'd be like, USA #1. And also there was one time when I emailed, he was this company. They were like the Coca-Cola, similar to like a Coca-Cola or something generic, and they had their own bottling facility. It was a soda company. So I emailed them and I said, I'm really fond of your soda. They're like, wow, an American likes our soda. They personally picked me up, at my ex's house. They picked me up on their motorbike, took me to a tour of their, facility, had me meet the CEO, really nice guy, and it was unreal. Yeah.
Yeah, the hospitality was extraordinary. Mostly now in Hong Kong, it's like it has its rough edges. So people tend to think that Hong Kong people are kind of rough because they have a abrupt nature when they talk, because they're very direct actually compared to, let's say, mainland Chinese. But actually, like I was like brought in and taken care of so well. I mean, it's unbelievable, the hospitality and the, how they took care of me. I was, and in mainland China, I had some very good experiences as well. Like at one time I was in Shanghai, and even I like just met up with a school teacher, and he invited me to his home. The first time I was invited to a private home for a meal, and I was, I went along, and it was really nice. They had had a meal already, and then it's like it was. Yeah, the hospitality is like they really, I didn't have really any, like, say, real negative experiences, to be honest. Out of all that time, I just have a few, where there were some rough points. Someone tried to, pickpocket me one time in mainland China, but it was such a feeble attempt. The guy was drunk, and, I was on him right away. So, but besides that, all that time, I never had any, no one stole my things. And I just had like positive and interactions with local people for the most part.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
You guys hearing you guys talk about your, international travels in Asia, I almost feel like I'm in a Monty Python skit and I want to start lying. Yeah, I'll tell you, it's nothing compared to me trip up to the high Arctic when I was rescued by a band of Inuit. Had to take me into their igloo. Oh, so hospitable, those Inuit. Making all that up. I've never been up to the high Arctic and no particular desire to go either.
Yeah, no, I feel yeah. Well, I mean, I made up a whole bunch of stuff because when I was working on TV shows, playing all kinds of different roles, detective, lawyer, FBI, a cop, you name it, I played so many different roles, and people were always like, oh my God, you were in Hollywood. Repent, repent, repent. And it was like, I was just an everyday folk. You know what I mean? Like I was just a pedestrian walking down the street. I was just this, I was just that, it was an experience. I said, I wanted to do acting, and it was funny because I wanted to do acting. I was doing it at the community college, taking classes. And when my dad found out, my dad thought I was taking business classes at Grand Rapids Community College. He's like, you want to be a damn actor? And it's funny because our neighbor, his daughter was acting in TV shows, and he was so fumed that I was in, and that's what led me to go to Chicago so I could try to do stuff there. There wasn't much there, so that I went to LA and I did it, and it is what it is, Well, it was an experience.
Absolutely. I mean, it sounds positive.
I love talking about theater. I've done about 15 plays in my life.
Oh, wow.
And,
I was gonna say, yeah. I was really, it's quite an experience. Go ahead, Gord. Yeah.
No, I did it in high school, and then a couple years after, did couple plays, and then I dropped it. And then my brother actually got into theater and came over to my house to run lines because he'd gotten a role in a play and he'd never done theater before. He'd just done one little production in Teachers College where he had 2 or 3 lines. Then we got a lead role with Guelph Little Theater, which is west of Toronto. And he was scared to death, lead role. So we were running lines and I was giving him some tips, some acting tips, talking about, when you got a list of words to say, you got to flavor each word. If you're saying I'm angry, I'm upset, I'm pissed off. You can't just say each of those 3 words. I'm angry, I'm upset, I'm pissed off. You have to give each word some feeling, some oomph. And you say this word in the second act. Well, you said it before in the first act, and they tie in together. So when you say it in the first act, when you say it the first time, you really got to punch it up so that people will remember it. When you say it the second time, they go, "Oh, remember when he said that in the first act?" The writer of the play had obviously tied these 2 things together, but the actor has to punch it. And I was giving him this tip, and my next door neighbor was on the board of directors with Markham Little Theater, Markham, north of Toronto. And she came up, she's like, "You do theater?" So I haven't done any for 10, 12 years. And she said, "Oh, we're always looking for guys." And it's just community theater, but it's a lot of fun. And she came to me with Cat in a Hot Tin Roof. And as soon as I saw Cat in a Hot Tin Roof, I said, "Oh, I can be Gooper. I can be Brother Mayan. I can be that guy." Because that character is such an annoying jerk. And it's nice to play. It's nice to play the bad guy. It's fun. And so then that got me going. And I did One for the Road, Willie Russell, Mousetrap. After Margaret, I did 10 or 15 plays, and a lot of fun. Theater is amazing.
No, that's fascinating. I mean, I took classes at the local theater in Grand Rapids, and it was unreal.
Did you do stage acting or television acting? Because there's a difference between the 2.
Oh, this was stage acting, and then we also did the improv 2 class or whatever it's called, which was
The one thing is when you're doing live theater, the thing about live theater is you have to sell it to the back row. So you have to chew the scenery a bit. You've really got to play it up. And I find one of Canada's favorite famous TV shows was called Corner Gas.
Yeah, I know that one real well.
And the thing I always found with Corner Gas is I found a lot of the characters really overacted. They chew, the expression you use is they chew the scenery. But all the actors on that show, aside from Brent Butts, who was a stand-up comedian, they were mostly stage actors who transitioned from the stage to acting in front of camera. And they're 2 entirely different mediums. And it's interesting because I have a friend of mine who I went to high school with, and I should get you to interview this guy because he's an award-winning writer, director, but not big name famous.
Definitely, I would love to.
Minor celebrity. Mike Edwards is his name, and we were talking about it one time, and he said to me that acting in front of a camera, as opposed to being on stage, is when you're acting on camera, it's kind of like pretend like someone is watching you.
Mm.
Pretend like someone is watching your every little move.
Mm-hmm.
And so, whereas on stage, you don't pretend everyone's watching, you try and grab their attention. Yo, over here, I'm over here. They call it focus. You want to get the audience to focus in on you as opposed to anything else on stage. There's no camera to say, we want to watch this, we want to watch that. The people have the whole thing, and you've got to get their focus on you or the tableau or the scene that you're in. So.
Yeah, that brings to mind, a situation when I was taking the classes at community college. We had our final exam. So it's the 2 of us, we're doing this scene, and it was like this, is this seat taken? I'm trying to sit down with her, have a cup of coffee or whatever, and have a date or something. And at the end, it just blew my mind. My professor, she's like, "Well, I would have liked to have seen a lot more expression out of you, Mark. I didn't see anything out of you." And then somebody in my class, she gets up, raises her hand. She goes, "Excuse me, I was sitting on this side of the room and I saw a ton of expression from Mark. I don't know what you were talking about.
You had a fan. You had a fan.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. But no, I knew that, I knew that there wasn't much in Michigan, and I would go to I went down to Lafayette, Indiana, Kalamazoo, because they would have like talent scouts, like fit, and they weren't real. You think that they're real. You see them in the Grand Rapids Press or whatever. You think that they're real. You go and and they're trying to say, oh, well, we need these types for the sitcom season, right? Not knowing that you could just go to LA and do like extra work like I was doing. And they have both times they'd be like, oh no, you're not what we're looking for. You're not what we're looking for. And it's almost like they were always looking for like quirky types like Screech from Saved by the Bell or something like that. And so I was full blown, saying I want to become an actor. And I mean, I did that stuff as a background, but I would never do it like, principal actor or anything, no interest anymore. But that's fascinating about the, stage work and all that you've done, Gordon. That's great.
You do any theater, Ian?
Actually, I did. I was in, I did The Music Man when I was in high school. So I participated. I had a role in that play, and I always had an interest in theater. The second year when I was going for for Oliver. The year after that, they were doing Oliver, and I was so focused on getting the main role because I felt, it just was, when I didn't get it, I was disappointed, and I decided I went into the wrestling club instead of, so I went, but I've always, I always had an appreciation for theater. Well, my mom's an English teacher, so obviously there's some influence there, and we have good theater, obviously, in Montreal. We have the National Theatre School, and we would go see, plays there, and we have Shakespeare in the Park, and so forth, and a lot of, community theater. So over the years, I have, on a regular basis gone to watch theater, and I always appreciated,
That's good, because you and Mark had your whole, being over in Asia, him in Vietnam, you in Hong Kong, and I'm out here. Now I got something to go with Mark, and
Yeah. I think that's a good experience, stage work. It's really interesting. I have a lot of respect for that. It takes a lot of memory work as well. So.
Oh, exactly. I hated memorizing lines and such.
Funny though, you mentioned, when you went for The Music Man, Harold Hill. I love that play. And also you mentioned Oliver Twist
Twist. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's another musical.
Yes.
And,
yeah, these are musicals, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and I've never once in my life done a musical, but one of the things I would often frequently do backstage during rehearsal when I wasn't on stage is I sing. I loved singing. The only thing is I have a horrible voice, and it was funny. I did a number of plays with this Markham Little Theater, and then one day this woman came up who was on she was on the board of directors that decides what plays they're doing and the casting and things like that. And she came up and she go, oh my God, we're doing a musical next month and we need a guy exactly like you. And I kind of lit up. Wow. And she goes, if you could only sing. Because I'd empty the theater if I had to sing an actual song. I actually went and I did audition for a play once, and my audition was singing Barry Manilow, Mandy.
Wow.
And that was my song to sing for the audition. So I sang it. And you've seen the American Idol audition tapes where the person is a horrible singer and they get quite well, he played the piano, he played Oh Mandy, and I'm singing, you came and you gave without taking, and I'm singing, and it's over and he's at pains. He's like, that was okay. And he's trying to be polite. And I said, if I sucked, just say it. and his face lit up. And I went, no, really, if you think I'm bad, that's okay. I can deal with it. And he goes, it wasn't good. And I'm like, okay. And he was so relieved because, you've seen American Idol. I'm a good singer.
Yeah.
No, you're not. You sound like nails on a chalkboard. Shut up. Never sing again. And he was afraid I would go off on him.
Well, I had a similar situation when I was in college. I went to the Wealthy Theater because they have these auditions where you can, audition at the local theaters. And I auditioned for this musical, and I go in that play, Lou Gramm, A Foreigner. Lou Gramm had this song, Just Between You and Me, and 1990. I bet you remember it. I sang, yeah, exactly. I sang it really good. And then they wanted to cast me for a part to be the guy doing sign language. I'm like, and I was working two jobs and going to college. And I just said, I can't be in the play anymore. I said, look, I don't have time. And he goes, why can't you be in the play? He was nice about it, but he's like, why can't you be in the play anymore? And I'm like, I don't have time to learn sign language. I came in here and I auditioned with my voice to do this. And I had been doing karaoke since I was in, high school at Village and Pizza. So I would do karaoke. I mean, I obviously practiced. And then I got another story real quick before I get you guys off. When I was in LA, because I lived in LA for 10 years. So now, since I was obsessed with doing karaoke, right? I like doing karaoke, right? So I get a bunch of guys together in LA and I posted on Craigslist back when Craigslist was legit, right? And I'm like, I'm trying to start a band. We're going to do these 80s cover songs. We all get together and they say to me, have you ever sung with a band before? They go, your voice is so low and so soft. I was just like, oh, okay.
Got some, yeah.
It was unreal. Yeah. Well, I think I'll end it at that. I really appreciate everyone sharing their, life experiences, their stories. That's exactly what we need. We need something uplifting nowadays, if you know what I mean.
Sure. Yeah, that's great. I appreciate the change in the content, so we can just take a refreshing, take a step back.
Yeah. Say the C word once. COVID.